Hey, greetings, everyone. This is your host and executive director of the American Institute of Stress. It's Will Heckman. Thank you for joining us once again today. And I'd like to ask that all of you who are listening to this podcast to go to stress.org, subscribe to our magazines, check out all the information we have. We have some new EAP stuff, employee assistance program stuff, and we have a lot of information about stress-related issues. And if you're watching us, I'm going to ask you, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. It really helps us to grow and it gets our message out there, which is really important. And by the way, today's podcast, we have a new sponsor. We're sponsored by AlphaStim. If you're struggling with anxiety, insomnia, or pain, you need to take a look at AlphaStim. It's an FDA-cleared non-drug medical device trusted by healthcare professionals all over the world. AlphaStem's proven, patented technology uses a very gentle microcurrent to help you feel better, and it does it fast, without the lasting side effects of medication. I've used it myself. It's easy to use, it's very portable, it's backed by extensive clinical research. AlphaStem fits right into your daily routine. So take some time, visit alphastem.com, learn some more, and take charge of your life. All right, so today we will be discussing something that I always thought was very important, and that's teen stress and mental health. Managing teen stress is crucial because adolescence is a formative period marked by significant physical, emotional, and social changes. High stress levels can negatively impact teens' academic performance, relationships, mental health, and potentially leading to anxiety or depression, and even some risky behaviors. By teaching teens effective coping strategies such as things like time management, mindfulness, and healthy communications, they can build resilience and develop lifelong skills for handling pressure. Supporting stress management early helps teens thrive, both in the moment and as they transition into adulthood. And to help me discuss this topic today, joining us today is a coach, Chuck Barnard. He is an author. He's written 5 books. He's a wonderful speaker, champions mindset mentor, and he has a personal experience. He's a father of 4. He's been in the education industry for over 30 years, and Chuck has a master's degree in special education, is certified in advanced behavioral modeling, and a Master NLP, time life therapy, and hypnotherapy practitioner. He also tells me he's been skiing for 56 years, which is which is a goal that I would love to have. And he's walked across burning coals with Tony Robbins on 3 different occasions, because 2 wasn't enough. And he loves traveling. Chuck has been a baseball player or a coach for over 50 years and has a greatest passion to see teenagers become champions, not only on the athletic field or in the classroom, but mostly in their life. He's also the founder of Success Institute and is known as the Champions Mindset Mentor, and we are proud to have him as a diplomate for the American Institute of Stress. So please join me in welcoming Chuck Barnard. Chuck, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. I love talking about the subject, so this will be great.
It's an important subject. I share some experience with you, having taught high school. You and I have both seen teenagers that cannot handle stress and what happens to them. Some of them turn to really risky behaviors or downright detrimental behaviors. But let me ask you something. In your experience, what is the most common source of stress for teenagers today? What do you think's going on?
Yeah, there's 3 main areas, and that hasn't really changed a lot, like the 3 areas. Some of the reasonings behind that have, but first and foremost, it's the pressures they internalize about academic performance or even the athletic, performing arts performance. So it's performance-based, right? They stress out over test taking and getting the good grades and in all those academic performance-based things. Number two is the social relationships, right? They peer pressure, trying to connect, feel like they belong, all those things that many of us can remember ourselves struggling with maybe during those adolescent years, trying to find your identity and make those connections. And thirdly, it is the family relationships. So those are the big three areas. And again, that hasn't necessarily changed a lot in terms of what teenagers have felt for stress. And what I find interesting about that is the first one, performance-based. I think that's what a lot of us think about. Teenagers stress over all the schoolwork, getting good grades, trying to get in college, all of that type of stuff. But the other two are relationship driven. And the reason I find that so important is, there's a long-term longitudinal study, Harvard University, on happiness. And what they have found in that is that the quality of your relationships are the most important factor in determining your happiness over the long term. So the fact that teenagers really struggle in the two big areas of relationships, peers and family, that's where a lot of stress comes from. I find that really intriguing and important because of its long-term impact if they don't begin to figure those sort of things out.
Right. I agree with you. I think in my experience seeing kids, they're so I don't know how susceptible to peer pressure and to any kind of something that a man your age or my age would just laugh about. They take very seriously. And I think that's due to just inexperience in life, and that's why they're lucky to have guys like you sort of teach them like, hey, is this going to be important a year from now? Relax. So yeah, I think that's good advice. I've also seen a lot of kids who have this stress, and it goes unmanaged. They do nothing to manage their stress, whether they don't have the skills or the experience, whatever reason. And in fact, they may even indulge in it, and escalate it themselves. But how can unmanaged stress have an effect on that teen's mental, even their physical health?
Yeah, that's a great question because you're right. So many teenagers, and I spent my career working with those teenagers who didn't fit in, right? So they were struggling in school, and stress was a huge part of that. And it has a huge impact on their ability to perform, right? So it becomes a cycle. They stress out about their ability to perform, right? They get all worked up about tests taken, all that. And when they're in that emotional stress, they don't perform as well. So it becomes this cycle. And when you are under stress and your brain's firing off those stress chemicals, it impacts your emotional state and your physiological state, right? So it will impact your immune system. People will oftentimes begin to develop like eating problems, sleep problems, their anxiety, depression, which are the two big mental health side impacts from prolonged stress. So all those are connected, right? When you aren't sleeping well, that impacts your immune system. And when your immune system's not working well, you get sick more often. And when you don't feel well, it's constantly cycling through, right?
Right.
So being in stress chronically has long-term implications on your overall health, leading to things like heart disease and potential diseases such as cancer and other things. There's a whole body of evidence about the long-term impact. So if you aren't learning to deal with it at a young age and you keep carrying it, it's not only just in that immediate time frame, you're bringing that forward over the years. So, but I'd say the two big ones for teenagers are the emotional ones with anxiety and depression. And we are seeing, particularly with young women, eating challenges too that manifest itself. And of course, self-medication, right? When kids aren't feeling well,
Yeah.
they're reaching for anything to help that. So, the alcohol and drugs and all those things that can be a byproduct of it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've noticed that when we do not teach stress management, you're right, kids are reaching for things, Adderall and whatever medication, even if it's a prescribed medication, so much more often it's too easy. I think we have gotten into the habit of taking the easy road of taking medication instead of sitting down and figuring out a way to manage our stress. And what's also important, and you mentioned it, is that when they're younger, it doesn't matter. It stays with you. I've seen young people get really sick from stress. You don't think of a 16 or 17-year-old in those terms. They're like indestructible. They're young. But you'd be surprised. Like Chuck said, they do get diagnosable problems like GAD, which is general anxiety disorder, or depression, and now they turn into young adults with those problems. And when, as a teenager in a school, you might have a bigger support system than when you're a 22-year-old working at a job. So I think and it's really important for us to teach some stress management skills. What age do you think that starts? What age do we start teaching our kids how to manage their stress?
There's some things that you start very young. As soon as they can really begin to understand communication, right? As a parent, and this was something I sadly didn't necessarily learn well enough until my kids began to get older, right? So there's some of those opportunities I think we missed early on how to kind of interrupt some of those patterns that you begin to see with my oldest in particular, right? So the oldest child, they're teaching us about a whole lot about being a
Right.
parent and all. Um, and he was a lot like me when I was younger, highly competitive, very driven, quick to fly off the handle, and learning to how to interrupt that pattern. I think it could have done a better job when he was younger, but certainly by upper elementary school, it was much more conscientious on our part, trying to help him deal with some of that intensity. But there are things like breath work, mindfulness. You mentioned those, I think, in your intro to the show. Those are two big ones, and they're real simple. And the breathwork one, when I started implementing this at the school level, just taking 2 to 5 minutes at the beginning, and I would have students for a multiple block period of time, right? So I had them a
Right.
little bit longer. But those 2 to 5 minutes, even if they weren't fully participating in the breath work, that quiet time when others were and I was, it had this calming effect. And I cannot overstate the impact it had on their ability to then regulate themselves, right? So they begin to feel stress again. Oh, I'm falling behind. I got this. As we're going through things, all right, look, looks like you're falling behind in this subject, trying to break that down. Just come on, breathe again, right? Come on, take a deep breath. And it's amazing, but we all see it too. Like we see professional athletes do it. We've experienced ourselves, particularly if you see somebody who's got to do like a presentation.
Mhm.
What do they almost always do before, they're really nervous, right? Got to get up on stage or present in front and just take a deep breath. I mean, you see it all the time. We know it works instinctually because we've experienced it, but hardly any of us habitualize it or know how to reach for it and do it consciously when we're feeling the stress. We get caught up in the stress and our breath changes and all of that. And so that's something you can begin at a very early age with kids. And the
Yeah.
other thing, and my daughter tells a story, and I'm not tie this into how you can apply this to stress, but she used to have these nightmares. She was little, and I I thinking she was probably like just around kindergarten age. But she tells a story, and I don't remember it because she's very creative. She's a writer. She wants to be a writer. Um, all these stories, and she says it's because she learned to really control her dreams. And she said, "I'm the one who taught her that." Because when she had these nightmares, I said, "Oh, there's a little switch inside, so you could just turn the channel. It's like just, like on TV. You don't like what's on that? Turn the channel." And she was young enough that she just, and she said she started being able to do that. So being able to change your thinking, you can begin to help kids at a very young age do that very thing. And uh, you know, it's a process that is ongoing. It's something you need to do regularly. But when you start kids early on and they realize that they can control that, wow, it's a
You,
big deal.
that's such a great example. And using the word regulate is right on. Teaching kids to regulate or change how they perceive things is something that adults need to know how to do too. It's funny that you mentioned it. Um, my daughter went through the same thing around kindergarten, started having some bad dreams. And like a dad, like you try to fix it, you gotta fix it. I went out and got a dream catcher and
Yeah.
and explained what a dream catcher is. And my daughter is academically blessed. At 5 year old, she was reading chapter books and no problem. So she read things about a dream catcher. And once I got that and she understood, that was the end of the dream. That was the end of the bad dreams. So she learned how to change her perception, the way she perceived things, just like you had your daughter change the channel. I'm also a big believer, as you are, in breath work.
Yeah.
First of all, it's free and it's always with you. The one thing we don't do is we don't teach young children or teenagers how to breathe,
Mm-hmm.
how to breathe correctly. Folks, if you're out there listening to me, look at somebody who's stressed out and watch them breathe. Their shoulders are going up and down. They're like, and then look at a baby sleeping when they breathe, and their stomach is rising and falling, rising and falling. Very, very different. In some martial art practices, they teach you how to breathe through your stomach, make your stomach as fat as they can, they call it, and that helps us. But we don't teach our kids that. That's why we need coaches like you to tell kids, okay, we're going to take time out. I've done that in classes too, especially when, you do a double block. For those of you out there, that means you're with these young people for an hour and a half. And it's just wonderful. No, it is. Um, but when you switch gears in the middle of that, adolescents have a hard time. But if you take a moment, do as Chuck said, some breathing exercises, it makes that transition better. And I think that's true about life too. Um, what about
Yeah.
the roles besides us as teachers and parents? What other roles do we play? Who else plays a role in helping teens manage that stress?
Well, I think coaches and educators can have a really big role. I mean, when you think about a kid's day, they are with coaches and teachers for probably really more than they are seeing their parents. I mean, when they're home, right? The nighttime you're sleeping, parents are doing things, they're doing homework. When you really think about the hours per day, a whole lot of that time falls on educators and coaches. And I don't see enough understanding from an education world, or may not really be understanding, because I think there is a growing understanding of the power of these things, but it's the, oh, I need every minute to get my content in, or I need this, or there's not a culture set up of just taking these few minutes to help ground kids in some of these practices, um, and even learning to interrupt patterns. There's a couple quick stories. One of them kind of related to what we were just talking about with the breath work too. And it was an athlete. It was a college athlete who was playing summer ball with my son, and he had struggled. That he was a very good player, starter on one of the top 10 D3 schools in the country, and he really struggled during his college season and going into that summer. And he knew what I did, so he asked if I could help him out. And I said, yeah, no problem. So before one of the summer games, a few techniques I did, and we were trying to link that to his breath work. So his first at bat, he did what I said, and he roped a line drive right at the right fielder. And he's like, wow, that felt pretty good. I'm like, yeah, right. It helps you get into that state you need to be in. Well, his next at bat, he hit this little dribbler, and he came by. I'm like, I said, do you know what you did? He goes, no. I said, your breath wasn't the same. Your breath was higher up. It wasn't deep down like you did before. He's like, really? I said, yeah, you change your breath. Not all breath is the same. So the next at bat, he did it from deep down, and he hit another rocket line drive, and came back. I'm like, I see what you mean. So it's understanding that not all breaths are the same, and teaching them, as you said, to learn what a good breath is, and that impact. And then the other thing that educators, coaches, parents can learn to do is ask different questions, to interrupt when you see a kid's beginning to stress out, and you can usually tell, right? I mean, it's not like you get all those signs and working up. The breathing's different, as you said. The posture's different. Their facial tensions, right? You can see when they're stressing out. Get them to change their posture, but then ask a question: how are you doing that? And once you begin to ask a process-oriented question, they right off the bat, they don't, I don't know, right? They have to go internal to figure it out. Doing that interrupts the pattern, gives you an opportunity to then embed a different suggestion, a more positive one, but it gets them to begin to kind of break down their own strategy for what's triggering the stress, and then what are they doing internally. And that awareness and regular interrupts is a huge game changer long term in helping kids gain the ability to manage stress. Begins with awareness, and then if you can begin to understand your own strategy, how to interrupt that with these other techniques, it's a game changer.
All right, so let me ask you something. We've both worked on school campuses. We see what they're like. Tell me what you think schools can do, because like you said, kids spend a lot of time at school. What can schools do to help promote stress coping strategies and just mental well-being in general?
Uh, Thank you for the question, because that's a passion of mine. That's really what I am working on now, is trying to bring some of this to schools. So there's a couple different levels that we can talk about. First of all, one is research from Dr. Yeager out of University of Texas, Austin, has shown that just teaching kids about mindset and neuroplasticity has a huge impact on their ability to perform. They actually perform better. They're more likely to take classes that are harder. They're more likely to finish those classes. Just from a 30-minute lesson being taught about neuroplasticity and growth mindset and the power of mindset. So beginning with that, which I think is a great starting place, right? But what we really want to begin to help students do is build habits in their lives and change some of the foundational
Yeah.
beliefs and all, which make up those mindsets that interfere with some of these confidence and self-esteem and all the things that can lead to stress, right? When you aren't feeling good about yourself and you don't think you can perform well, and you don't think you can make friends well, and you think all these negative thoughts about yourselves, that original mindset, if you can begin to change that, which you can, then that is going to have a profound impact on their ability and readiness mentally to implement some of these techniques that we want to do to then teach stress. So, one, I think schools can do that much better job with a direct curriculum training program. I do believe, though, it there has to be ownership on the family and kids' part, right? So, as much as I think it should be required, when you do require something like this and the kid's not buying into it, it's probably not going to be that effective. So
Right.
there's a culture, yeah, and there's a cultural thing that has to go on in schools. The other component is you can teach teachers and parents how they can help interrupt patterns. And second part of this is build habits, right?
Right.
So I talk about three phases when I do work with schools, families, what have you, that we want to get these kids to go through. One is to take responsibility. That means taking responsibility for their own emotions, their memories, their beliefs, the labels they've accepted or have given themselves. All of these kind of components of a mindset, they need to understand that they are responsible for those things. You aren't always responsible for what happens to you, but you are responsible for what you do about that. And so many of those things impact how you deal with stress.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is what I refer to as weeding the garden, right? And I have a beautiful story about that metaphoric story. But the idea is when you want a garden to bloom, right, you got to get the good soil in there. You want to get all the weeds out. You plant the right plants. And when everything's done, it looks gorgeous, right? I mean, it's a beautiful thing to look at and it helps calm you, all those wonderful things. But if you don't tend it, you come back months later, that's going to be overgrown and overrun with weeds. You can't just take out those limiting beliefs and those unresolved negative emotions and those labels. You can't just take them out once. You have to regularly read the garden, and that's these habits. And I talk regularly all the time about two foundational habits that I think everybody should develop in their lives.
You know,
And that, oh,
as a parent, we tend, I bet you do the same thing. Your kids come home from school. You ask them, like, okay, do you have homework? What's your assignments and stuff like that? Maybe we should take a moment and ask them, like, what was your biggest challenge today? What'd you do about it?
yeah,
I don't know how schools can fit this in. I understand, and I'm sure you've heard the expression "teach like your hair is on fire," because we are cramming. For those of you that don't know, Chuck and I know, we are cramming so much curriculum down their throats so fast that I don't even know if teachers can read it that fast, let alone students. Every second, bell to bell, instruction, curriculum, it is unbelievably packed that I used to say our biggest luxury is taking 5 minutes to think about it. So
yeah,
taking 5 minutes to teach some of the strategies Chuck just talked about is so important. I can't stress that enough. For instance, Chuck, tell me a kid comes home What should a parent be looking for? What are some of you talked about a little bit, but when you're looking at your kid, first of all, the 15-year-old, they're not telling you what's wrong. I don't care. They're making everything is great. Fine. Baloney. Um, Chuck, what should the parents be looking for? What are some signs? Excuse me, not that a kid has had a bad moment, but they're chronically being overwhelmed by stress.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And some of the more common ones would be that moodiness.
Mm.
And it's teenagers are moody, right?
Yeah.
But you're looking for kind of consistent extremes and change in that. And there is the challenge, right? For parents, it's like, oh, that's need to expect that, right? That's what teenagers do. They're moody. Well, yes, but if you've seen something higher highs and lower lows, and couple that with things like changes in their eating, their sleep, they're not enjoying or pulling back from some of the things they used to enjoy, maybe spending more time in their room, more time on social media. Those sort of changes are like, all right, let's begin to try to figure out what's going on here. And maybe there's some patterns we need to interrupt. Those changes in behavior and moodiness are warning, can be warning signs, right? And we're trying to find out, all right, to what extent it's happening. And I've had a number of students over the years, and this is a cultural thing that is very disconcerting to me. But the kids go home, they go to their room, they've got all this stuff set up in their room, and the gaming, and that's where they go. That's where they are, and little things like family mealtime. And I totally understand, right? I had 4 kids. When we get to high school, family mealtime it's a lot. It becomes really challenging sometimes. But we used to try to insist on at least, all right, when you come home, somebody will be there to eat with you, right? Or we might not all 6 of us eat at the same time, but 2 of us can,
Right.
3 of us can, right? So try to have those. But I've been disappointed by how early those family meal times break down, and those conversations that you can have with kids instead of just letting them, grab the meal that you might have cooked and then go off, eat it in their room, eat it in front of the TV, what have you. And at I think, my humble opinion, too young ages, right? Like upper elementary school, even the middle school, where mealtime wasn't a thing
Right.
anymore.
Just disappears. So, like it dissipates.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a rule in my house. I mean, we had one daughter who was extremely active. Every night we all ate dinner together. I didn't care.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was 10 minutes. We ate that, but 15 minutes. I don't care. I don't care. We still do. I mean, my wife and I eat dinner every night together. When my daughter is, we eat dinner. We always eat together. And one of the things, maybe it was the way I was brought up, but everything comes out when you're eating. If think about you, if you want to have a conversation with somebody, you might say, "Hey, let's do lunch." For some reason, the act, the of eating together brings us closer together and allows us to express ourselves a little bit better. It just does. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. God knows we've all had those Thanksgiving dinners. But it's also a good way, as Chuck said, that you can look for those signs when you're sitting at the dinner table and all of a sudden your kid is a change in their mood. Of course, like Coach said, they're moody anyway. But if you see a change in their mood, you got to find out what's going on. don't let up. Keep doing it, right? I mean, don't let up. What's wrong? Nothing. I'm fine. Baloney. What's wrong? It's like I can tell something's bothering you. And if I couldn't do it, my wife could. She's a teacher
Yeah.
too. So one of us is going to find out, what's going on. All right. So
My
we
wife was
talked.
very good at it.
Yeah. You know, and sometimes that has to do with gender. My daughter would tell me something. She wouldn't want to tell mom. She would tell mom stuff she wouldn't want to tell me. Fine, I don't care. Long as you know that you got a support system. Adolescents need support. What I wanted to ask you, Chuck, is if you could tell, we talked a little bit about breathing. What are some other effective methods teens can use, or adults too, because they work across the board, can do to reduce or manage their stress on a daily basis, not wait till it all builds up so it's a chronic problem? What can they do just every day?
Yeah, wonderful question. And going back to those ideas of the rituals, there are some principles I say should be part of those. One is some movement practice, just even a little bit of exercise or stretching. Just it doesn't,
Yeah.
I mean, I advocate working out at some point, but it doesn't have to be that in the morning or evening. Just loosening that body up, stretching, releasing some of that tension. So that's one thing on a regular basis. The idea of mindfulness, meditation, or prayer, or a combination of those. So depending on religious viewpoints or all, but this idea of focusing on like one thing, mindfulness, where you're just guiding your attention, meditation, where it's more about trying to do what I think neurologists would probably say is impossible, which is try to train yourself to not think, right? Where you're clearing your mind completely. But that process of doing that, or just the prayer idea of connecting to a higher power, all those have powerful impact on your overall emotional, physical, spiritual well-being. Um, the breath work, as we said, but two other practices are so simple, incredibly powerful, are gratitude and journaling. And journaling in the evening, reflecting, and there's some, it doesn't have to be long, right? Sometimes you might need to be long if you've really had like a stressed out day where you need to kind of, all right, what triggered all that? Why was this such a hard day? And trying to figure out what you were doing and what was going on inside of you, that you might want to journal a little bit more. But lots of times it can be simple little notations, but getting it down on paper, the writing it down on paper is powerful. And I talk about and try to teach some cognitive behavioral therapy essential questions really about that can help guide that. But the other one is gratitude. Start your day and end your day writing down and thinking about what you're grateful for changes, it reframes so much. And when you begin to focus on the positive, it has impact beyond just you. And there's a Framingham study, and I don't know if you've heard of that or familiar with it at all, but it was like a heart study. Harvard University did it, Framingham, Massachusetts, longitudinal study. And researchers went back and looked at the data years afterwards and discovered that emotions were being transmuted outside from you to your inner circle, from that inner circle to their inner circle.
Mm.
So positive or negative were spreading. The fascinating thing to me was they were spreading through women. Men were impacted by the way women projected their emotions. Kids were, everybody was. And negative emotions had a little more impact than positive emotions. But when you do things like practice gratitude, it changes those thinkings and changes your emotions, and it can change that spread of those negative and make you less susceptible to the influence of negative emotions around you. So, those are big. And again, all of this doesn't have to be because, like, I don't have time for that. My day is so busy. Well, first of all, you aren't really being honest with yourself because we all have the same amount of time a day. The question is, what are we going to prioritize in that? And why wouldn't you prioritize something that can have such a major impact on not just you, but your relationships, your family, every aspect? You'd really need to begin to question why you wouldn't make that a priority. And it doesn't need to be long, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to take hours out of your day.
And I love the idea, always have, of journaling. Um, I guarantee you when you approach your kid about it, they're not going to want to do it. They're going to see it as like another book report or something like that. But no, it is not like that. And I think I found that guiding them through their journaling really helps. Well, I don't know what to write about. Very simple. I want you to tell me one thing that happened today that you remembered that made you feel good. And write about one thing today that you didn't feel so great about. That's all. That's all I want you to do. And you were right. It's that physical connection of actually doing the writing. And don't let them. I hate to say it because I'm old, but I prefer that they write it than type it.
Yeah.
If they can't, I understand. But the writing of it, the physicality, the connection of the movement of your hand, the making of the letters and the words and putting it together on paper to what your feelings are, makes that real connection and makes them able to maybe understand it a little better. I think
Absolutely.
that's a great idea, Chuck. Journaling has really helped. And it can make people better writers too. It's just
Yeah.
an offset. So um, we're running out of time, but I did want to ask you about one thing. And in my experience, and you tell me if it's been yours. The number one thing that contributes to kids' stress, especially teenagers and younger now, is peer pressure. Oh my God. If they're not wearing the right thing, and if you ask a kid, who cares? What are they going to say? You don't understand. Yeah, I understand. It's just not as important as you think it is. What do we do? It's their inner circle, like you said, is everything to them, and they're so much more connected to their inner circle than you and I were when we were kids. Well, I was a kid long before you, but still, because they're constantly connected with that phone. It's a constant barrage of what somebody else is thinking about what you're doing. What do we do? How do we handle that kid who's succumbing to I don't want to say all peer pressure because some peer pressure is good and depending on who the friend is, but the negative stuff that you get from your friends. Now put that in quotation mark. These kids' friends. Sometimes they're just acquaintances, but
It's a very important question. The danger of oversimplifying it, it is trying to help them with their own self-image and confidence of who they are, that comfortableness with them. And how do you do that? Well, we got to find out what the beliefs are, self-identity, those labels that I've talked about before. And those that don't support them, show them through processes of how to cut that cord. Let's let go of that and build those positive ones. And when you feel comfortable about who you are, and really kind of get that, then it's not that you aren't susceptible to peer pressure, but it has less of an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And you're 100% right about today's world with social media, and it is a huge deal. And there's a whole lot coming out, more and more research all the time. I don't know if you're familiar with Jonathan Haidt, who's a professor in New York University, I think it is, but he was a co-author of the book, The Anxiety Generation, and what was the other one? Oh, The Coddling of the American Mind. And both talk about some of these challenges with teenagers, and right now the social media impact and social comparison 24/7 all the time. They're seeing all these quote perfect people out there, right, who are doing this one, and so much of it isn't real to begin with, but to them it is. And it's having in fact, Jonathan Haidt argues that a lot of it he's shown is causative to anxiety and depression, not just correlative. That's not, there's some debate about that, but I think I'm in agreement when I look at some of that research. It's like, yeah, boy, I think you might be right. I think it may be causative, going back to those phones and having them all the time. And it's especially true for teenage girls. And the anecdote to that, there's a couple things. We can talk about the social media piece and separation from phones and all that. I think there's a lot of good things that can be done from that. But if we can go back to that foundation about what kids really believe about who they are, and that self-image and that confidence, and build all those positive beliefs, if we can get that at an early enough age, that's going to have a huge impact. And when I say early enough age, it's not like, so I worked with middle schoolers, right? We can make dramatic changes in middle schoolers by breaking down some of those old beliefs. And it can have a profound impact on, I mean, I could give you story after story.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's not too late. Middle school, high school is never too late. But if you can do it at a younger age, you've got all those other years to reinforce, right, and keep building that success loop on all these positive self-identity kind of characteristics. So when they're entering those teen years, there's already a real strong foundation there that just it makes that peer pressure less. It takes some of the power away from it.
Right.
You become one of the leaders instead of one of the followers.
You're so right. When they start like a middle school and they get a good sense of who they are, when they're transitioning into high school, which is a totally different world, and they have a better sense of self, they're more successful. They're more successful at staying on track and being a good person, all those things, managing their stress. They all come about. I always thought that we're never going to get their phones away from them. I don't care what you think. I don't care what we should do, what the school should do. It's not going to happen. I've been there. I promise. It doesn't matter what the teacher says. It doesn't matter what the administration says. You're not going to get their phones from them. You can restrict usage and maybe make it a thing that we're going to have a no phone hour where we're just going to do anything non-electric, something like that, something that some happy compromise. Should not get their phones away from them. I promise. I've known kids to carry two phones so that when you take your phone away from them, they still got one. Excuse me, but so we have to find out a way, and I think, Chuck, a couple of the ideas that you had and talked to us about today, everyone should make note of that. We're talking to a guy who has a lot of experience with it. All right, we're running out of time, but I did want to get to one thing. Coach, you have walked on coals. You have gone skiing for what, 50 years or whatever. Um, and you walked on coals 3 times. God knows why. I'm sure it was had a good reason. But what do you do personally every day to help manage your stress?
Wonderful question. So those rituals that I talk about in the morning, I actually do a workout in the morning too. So my
Mhm.
morning ritual is a little bit longer, but I start out with I'm a religious person, so I have some prayer and reading time. I look at my day, do my breath work, get my workout in, and that's kind of my morning ritual. I oftentimes will put on music, positive, upbeat music, right, to kind of get that mood going. In the evening, it's some light stretching, quiet time, a few minutes before I go to bed. Again, some breath work, journal, gratitude, and then go to bed, hit the hay.
You know what? All of those are great things. And if you're not a person into prayer, meditate. Sit down and prayer is a kind of meditation. So, all of those things you do. I work out too, even at my advanced years. And
Yeah.
I found it's very helpful. I do it in the morning. The best advice I ever got, because I was talking to a psychologist buddy of mine, and I said, as I get older, the motivation to work out is, less. I'm not competing anymore like I used to. I was a competitive athlete. He said, take all motivation out of it. I said, what are you talking about? He said, make it as like brushing your teeth. It's just something you do every day. You don't think about it. You don't think about whether you want to do it. You just do it. It's brilliant. Chuck, thank you so much. You gave us
Thank
some
you.
great ideas, some great insights on what people can do. And if you're listening to this, remember, this is a guy who's worked with kids for a very long time, not just your kid, but all kids. I know we all think our kid is special, but they do have certain traits that they all share, and like immaturity, which is why when you're lucky enough to get Chuck Barnard to teach your kid or coach your kid, you should be happy about that, because he helps them to become a little bit more mature and able to handle the stresses of that life. Coach, thanks so much. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Great. Appreciate the opportunity.
All right, that's going to do it for today. This has been your host, Will Heckman. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Hey, don't forget, hit the subscribe button, follow this podcast. I also want to remind everyone that just as stress is different for each of us, there is no one stress reduction or management strategy that's right for everyone. So that means you need to join us next time as we explore more stress management strategies and insight on finding contentment. So good day, everyone.